Well, it's been 6 months since we've completed our self-built overland truck. Now, we put £150,000 into this project, and we felt now was a good time to share our thoughts. Did we get it right, and what would we do differently? Welcome back to the channel.
Well, it was always our intention at the end of the build to spend at least 3 weeks somewhere in the UK testing all of the aspects of the heating, the hot water, the articulation, the actual truck itself. I'm sure Phil would have more technical terms to use, but just making sure everything worked before we went off on a trip. But that didn't really pan out because we ran out of time. Phil just didn't work quickly enough. So at the end of the 10 months, we came to Spain and then into Morocco to test the truck. And we were slightly nervous about that, but actually it turned out to be the ideal place to test it. Fantastic conditions, lots of off-road travel, and actually lots of variances of heat and cold as well, in terms of weather.
But before we get into the nitty-gritty of the performance of the vehicle and the outcome, I suppose, I just want to give a little bit of a backstory as to, I suppose, the start of the process, and hopefully the video will follow a sort of logical sequence. And of course, when you start at the beginning, it's all about the design. It's about your needs. And I think this is the thing with overland trucks. They are very specific and very bespoke to the owner's needs. And that really was, for us, the starting point.
Yes.
And I'm going to start with the base vehicle. And I do have some notes. And of course, I'm going to put my glasses on. Now, we had obviously lived full-time in a truck previously. And therefore we had a really good understanding in terms of our energy needs, the size, the type of travel that we do, and that informed the sort of the basis really for this build. So the base vehicle was really important, and obviously finding that base vehicle was a bit of a challenge because I think post-COVID everyone had the same idea, and that's across Europe. There was a real demand in sort of base vehicles and trying to find the perfect vehicle, if there's such a thing. Now, we knew, and I've got my glasses on obviously because I need to read this out, we wanted an 18-ton base vehicle. Now, we knew that we're never going to travel at 18 tons, but one of the things that we really wanted from the build was to have spare capacity in every element of the build, and more will sort of follow on that. But we didn't want to be close to that weight limit, so we didn't want a 12-ton truck traveling at 11 tons. We wanted enough capacity so that when we drive off-road, for example, that nothing was going to be stressed, and that was a sort of a factor. So 18-ton was a given. The dimensions, particularly the height, was really important. The last truck was 3.92 meters, and we wanted to bring it in under that, and we set out to build at 3.65, and we've achieved that, so we're really happy with that. The overall proportion in terms of the wheelbase, so the length I suppose, was a really important factor because we knew what we wanted internally in terms of the layout, but we also knew, and a big part of this build for us was the ability to carry a motorcycle, and yet we didn't want this really big long sort of back end. So the wheelbase, getting the right vehicle, so suddenly it has to be 18 tons. Suddenly, you know, we want a big wheelbase, ideally 4.2. We ended up with a 4.5. In an ideal world, we would have had a left-hand drive vehicle, but it was just becoming more and more difficult to try and source a vehicle.
And outside of the UK, unaffordable, I think, by the time you brought it back into the country and so on. Yeah.
So, and ideally, I suppose, again, I did mention it early on in the whole build process, ideally I wanted an older vehicle. Now, we also wanted air conditioning, we also wanted the ability to get parts for that vehicle, so...
But we didn't want it to need AdBlue, so there was a very small window really of crossover where things weren't too electrical but still had some of the bits that we wanted.
And ideally, when you narrow it down, it was either going to be a Mercedes or it was going to be an MAN. And here we are, we come across this, and actually something that didn't have 3 or 4 or 5 or even 600,000 miles on it. So there's, you know, suddenly when you sort of look at what's available on the market, there's not a big offer.
No.
So, and here we are with the MAN TGM 18 ton with a 4.5 meter wheelbase. Now, the vehicle right now is 17 years old. It's 280 brake horsepower. Again, when you look at these vehicles, you know, it would be very, you know, very easy to say, oh yeah, I want 480 brake horsepower, you know, a V8 engine. Why? So it's not a company running this, it's, you know, private people, and you've got to get realistic in terms of, you know, fuel consumption, your overall running costs. You know, we wanted a 4x4, we didn't want a 6x6. So there was a lot of considerations right at this sort of early stage, because getting the base vehicle right is of paramount.
Key to everything, isn't it?
It really is. And so that process took a long time in trying to find the base vehicle, and I know a lot of people feel exactly the same. And so that was a bit of a, I wouldn't say long drawn out process, but it was a process that had to be right.
But it was months, wasn't it? We were looking for months.
Yeah, it was. Now, when we got the vehicle's got 100 or had 100,000 miles on it when we bought it. It's ex-government agency, and admittedly we did have to spend £10,000 on the vehicle, on mechanicals. Very frustrating, but I suppose ultimately we've got a vehicle now that's running perfectly, and here we are 6 months in. It's pretty well tested and doing well. Next up is the habitation box itself. Now, if you follow the build, you know that I bought an old freezer box, cut it down to size. So basically I took about 200mm off the side walls, dropped the roof, and then took about almost a metre off the back and put a new panel in the back.
Put it all back together again.
Cut out the apertures for the doors and windows, and here we have it. We have a hab box. Now, the panels are 100mm panels. The floor is a bit bigger, and so yeah, you do lose a little bit, but a question that people have asked me is, would you do it again? And I absolutely would, because the cost saving is huge.
You saved a fortune.
Even with logistics and, you know, putting in a new panel, some new extrusions, adhesive, you know, all in, you know, you're only talking a couple of £1,000 for this box, as opposed to 25,000.
And we really have put it through its paces in Morocco. It's absolutely solid. Yeah. One of the things that we had a Knaus motorhome that we took to Morocco years ago, and when we came back, all the furniture had moved inside, and there were gaps between the fridge unit and the wall, and nothing has moved in here. It's absolutely solid.
Yep.
And in terms of weather, we've had snow and minus temperatures in Morocco to in the 30s, and there's very little expansion contraction. There is some, but it's not huge. It's
incredibly efficient. I mean, from a heat point of view, especially. Obviously, it was designed as a freezer box, but from a heat point of view, it is incredible that once you introduce just under a small amount of heat into this box, and the fabric is warm, it just maintains it. You know, you don't have to keep the heating on. It is.
But vice versa, it doesn't overheat either. If you keep the sun out, it stays relatively cool inside, and if you put the air conditioning on, it cools down really quickly.
Yeah.
So I think the habitation box and the insulation of it and how you built it, I think that's a real win. From a testing perspective, it's been pretty perfect, really.
Yeah. What I will say is they do take a lot of finding. A friend of mine has also found a clean box. Now, you might have to drive up down the country. You might have to look at 20 or 30 boxes before you find a good one, but they are out there. And it's just a case of sort of finding them, usually from a private seller, and that's where this one come from. We
did have to take the fridge unit out of ours, which meant we had to do some work to the front wall, but we were actually able to resell that and recoup probably about 80% of the cost of the box. So that was another win.
It was. Right, getting on to, so I mentioned the apertures, the doors and the windows. They've come from Outbound. We've talked about them before, and I'm not going to be buying on about them, but they are a superb product. And if I was building another box, I wouldn't hesitate, you know. And there are other manufacturers out there, but I would say a lot more expensive. And I think value for money, they're superb.
10 out of 10 for Outbound. And then they will have a fly screen as well. And the blackout blind actually works as a really good insulator, so you can have it sort of half down like this and just let a trickle of air in. So they are good windows, we really like those.
Did we get the layout right? I'm going to let Izzy speak about this, because it's something that obviously we we didn't really procrastinate over, because we had a box which was of a similar layout before, and we thought we liked the layout, we liked the bed at the back, the seating area at the front.
We wanted to keep the bedroom separate, because we've noticed, and it's the same in this box as the last box, when you go to bed, that area stays much cooler. You're not cooking in that area, you're not living, I suppose, in that area. And personally, I like a separate bedroom that feels separate from the rest of the truck. So I think from that perspective, the layout works really well.
Yeah.
I think I was too generous with the length of your seat, because you're not super tall. I know you're quite tall, but you're not super tall. I think we could have shaved off maybe 20 centimetres from your seat length and had some tall space, which would have been really handy for things like a broom.
Yeah.
Just little bits that you want to carry.
So when you're designing a box, it's a, you know, on paper, the on paper and the reality are two different things. And so you think you've got it right. So for example, we've got a big bed. So we've got a 1.6 meter wide bed. We don't really need that.
No, but it is lovely.
It is
when
lovely.
When it's hot, it's lovely.
But we could have shaved 100 mil off that. Now, you know, okay, 100 mil off the seat, or 150 mil off the seat. Suddenly, you've got 250 mil. And that's enough for a bit of tall storage, hanging storage if you like. So it is achievable that we don't have that tall hanging space. But actually, I'm fine with it, because I really like the layout. It's quite airy, and for two people, it's a big space.
And I think that would have impacted on the size of the water tank as well, so we would have lost some of that capacity there. So there's pros and cons to everything, and I think this is the big thing. There is always going to be compromise. I actually think, considering we designed it ourselves, I think we did a pretty good job of getting the layout almost right. I would say 95% there.
So Izzy just touched on water. So the water tank is below where we sit, and it's a 550 litre tank, which I'm really happy with. I always wanted to try and get the biggest tank in that I could within the space, and it's working out really well. We can do about 2 weeks.
Maybe longer if we don't shower.
And so that element is a bonus. And here you go. If you sort of rub from Peter to pay Paul, then, you know, ultimately something is going to give. So it sort of swings and roundabouts. But we've got a 200 litre waste tank. Now, we had a sort of a much smaller waste tank in the last truck, and it was an element that we wanted to try and get right in this truck. And that 200 litre tank is brilliant, because when we're using the washing machine in particular, you know, we're able to sort of hold 2 loads, if you like, at least 2.5 loads. You don't know until you do it, and then you sort of think, yeah, that's about right.
I think it was a really key to the layout and the design that we'd actually lived in a truck before, and 2 motorhomes, because we knew what we wanted, we knew what was feasible, we knew how much room certain things take up. I think if you're starting from scratch and you've never done that, I think it would be very difficult.
Well, it's that thing, you don't know what you don't know.
No, yeah.
And hopefully this video will help inform people, you know, if you're in the middle of a build or thinking about a build, then hopefully you'll take something away from this. Now, in terms of services, again, the whole heating element, and this build for us was always about redundancy. It was about if one system fails, is there something else to back it up? So in terms of the heating, we've got diesel wet heating. So we've got diesel heating through a wet central heating system. So we have wet underfloor heating, we've got the radiators and the tile rail, and we can isolate that the summer and the winter accordingly. And I feel that we've got that absolutely bang on. Now, arguably, and somebody did contact me to say we've got exactly the same electrical setup as you in terms of the solar, batteries, 5,000 watt inverter, and we run electric underfloor heating. And it's easy enough, with the amount of insulation, it's easy enough to heat the box, no issue whatsoever. And that's great. And, you know, potentially, you know, that is a route that you could go down if you're putting in a really big electrical system. The downside is, obviously, if there's a lot of snow or you're really dependent on that electric, you're potentially leaving yourself in a sort of a tricky sort of position if something fails. And
if that's your only source of heating, yes.
Yeah, so for us, we've also got diesel air heating, and if we really have to, we can use the air conditioning unit as a heater as well. So there's options. So sticking with the electrical system, now I've touched on it, we've got almost a full roof of solar, just over 2000 watts, and arguably we've overspec'd the electrical system, except we haven't. And the reason I say that is because, of course, you know, here we are, it's a hot sunny day, middle of summer, you know, you don't really need that much in terms of solar and systems to live. But in the winter, and certainly when you're traveling full time, it's a different ball game. And yes, we have a big electrical system. Yes, it costs us a lot of money, but we know from experience, we know from those short winter days when it's grey and raining and horrible and there's snow on the panels, that you need enough capacity to be able to survive for a few days. You need enough capacity to at least start your vehicle and get something in. And I feel that's where we're at. So we have the ability then to use the gas, for example, as opposed to the induction. And that's what it's about. It's about trying to sort of think in every scenario and work around should you have, or if something should fail.
We decided right from the get-go that we didn't want to have one fuel source. Like, lots of people are very keen on just having solar, but for us, I think we felt that we wanted those options. So as Phil just pointed out, we've got a hob that's a mix of induction and gas. We have an underslung gas tank as well. So we can heat water and heat the box in a number of different ways. And it means that if the whole solar system fails, touch wood it never does, we can still be warm. From a testing perspective, I don't think the electrical system hasn't faltered, has it? There hasn't been a single problem.
No.
We haven't once thought, oh God, well, actually we did, but that was my fault. I wired something incorrectly. But we haven't once thought something doesn't work, we don't understand this. This little thing on the wall, the servo, is excellent. We know exactly where we are at any given point. And do you know, after a while you just stop looking because you just know if the sun's out, it'll be fine. But
again, we went down the Victron route. We know Victron, we like Victron, and you know, same again, I would, you know, if I was in another build,
it would do the same.
It would be Victron.
Yeah.
Right, speaking of electrics, air conditioning. Now, we have a Truma unit. It's a Sapphire Comfort RC.
So, and underbench.
On the bench, 2,400 watts of cooling capacity, 1,700 of heating capacity. And again, we have tested it only to about sort of 33 degrees. And it's not really until you're about 35 to sort of just in excess of 40 that is the true test. Even though I installed it as per the manufacturer's instructions, I'm actually going to make a little modification, because someone contacted me to say if you actually draw the air being drawn in, if you draw it from the colder box, that recycling air, colder air, obviously into the chiller, if you like, it's obviously making it easier for it.
Makes it more efficient, doesn't it?
And it's making it more efficient, and the air is getting colder and colder. And so yes, I do have to make a modification. It was installed correctly, but I think it could be even more efficient.
Yeah, I think I can't remember the chap's name, but I think it was an excellent point, and
yeah,
thank you.
Yeah. The only thing I would say very quickly on the air conditioning unit is it is noisy. So
yes.
When you're trying to sleep with it on, it's you know, it's even though there's a sleep mode on it, it's still quite noisy. So,
but what we've tended to do is have it on, and then put the little. We have one of these in the bedroom as well. The Scirocco fan. Put the air conditioning on before we go to bed for a couple of hours. Use the fan to move the air around, and then turn it off when we go to bed. And we find that that's cool enough to at least help us get off to sleep. And we sleep quite well, so we don't tend to wake up if it's too warm.
Yeah. Now, the whole water and plumbing side of things, obviously I did all of that myself, and I have to confess that I did have one little leak, which was the trap seal in the shower. You know, I think I've done okay actually, considering the amount of plumbing that's gone in here. And that once I realised that, then obviously that was a quick fix, and that's it. And again, given all the washboard roads and terrain that we've travelled over, it's done really well.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that I can highly recommend are the Morocco pumps. they're Italian, they're a geared pump, they're a geared smart pump is how they word it, and they are superb. They're quiet, they're progressive, there's no spitting.
Yeah.
You know, I have put a half-litre accumulator tank in there. They say you don't need one, but I've put one in, and the system just works perfectly. We're really, really happy with it.
It's very good. We would maybe change the shower.
Yeah.
So we fitted a shower with just a very simple knob to turn it on and off. We didn't want anything too fancy that stuck out too far, would take up too much space. But one of the real failings is, as you probably know, when you're showering and you've got limited water, you tend to shower, get wet, turn it off, lather up, turn it back on again. When you've got soapy hands, the knob is impossible to turn. There's nothing on it that you can get a grip of. It's a silly little thing, really, but
kind of 21st century problem. But
yeah,
you know, yeah. Have a think about. It's the detail. It's the day-to-day stuff that you're, you know, things like that become an annoyance. Yeah. So anyway.
And what about the water filtration system? Because we've had some fairly dodgy water in Morocco, haven't we? When we were down in the south, where they said we couldn't drink it, but we were drinking it.
Yeah, I mean, it was fine. You sometimes get a little bit of a funky taste of it. No, we weren't ill. We didn't have any issues.
No.
And we are selective about the water that we put into the tank, and you know, it is filtrated, but just I mean, it's been good. We haven't been ill, so I suppose
it's done what it's supposed to do.
Yeah. I mean,
I wouldn't
overall,
have wanted to drink that water if it hadn't been through the filtration
well, we
system.
wouldn't have done. That's the thing. You wouldn't have put it in.
No.
So, but overall, yeah, really happy. I'm just turning the page because I need to keep in check. Yeah. Right, choice of materials for the build. Now, there's a number of routes we could have gone down with this, but
we debated a lot, didn't we, about colour and
weight and all of that. But ultimately, we had 80mm Latvian birch ply in the last build, and we've gone down the same route. It's a high quality birch ply. I'm so pleased with it. I say birch ply, that is oak veneer, if you like, or oak finish on the cabinet fronts, which we're really happy with. But the solid nature of that cabinetry is just a triumph for me. It's just, it hasn't moved one single bit, and that's testament to, I want to say, to the guy that installed it.
It's got in it.
But it's not a testament to the guy that installed it. It's a testament to the cabinet makers who built it, and they were just superb. So yeah, I look around now and it's, you know, there's not a gap. There's just, you know, it's exactly the same today as it was when I fitted it. The worktop, it's a solid surface. Again, you know, we've used it in the past, we like it.
Well, it's easy, it's not bonded to anything. It doesn't have to have a wood substrata, it's just a solid piece of material.
Yeah.
So it's not going to go anywhere, it's not going to split apart or break. It's lovely, actually. It's quite warm to the touch, isn't it? It just feels nice. Yeah,
but if you're anyway talented, you can fit it yourself. You can just buy a piece, you know, get a jigsaw, cut out
working equipment, isn't it?
Yeah, cut out your apertures and drop your sink in, and you know, your hob, and so it's nice from that perspective. So that was a bit of a triumph.
Yeah.
One of the things that we got slightly wrong was the back cushions. We've gone for a 2-inch back cushion. We should have gone for a 3-inch. We messed up really, because we actually had to get these redone. These were 5-inch. And
it was too deep.
It was too deep. So
there wasn't enough room for our fat bottoms on the sofa.
Yeah, so we had to change them, and that cost us a few quid. So. And
it'll cost again when we make them bigger.
Yeah, the shower door. People have asked us about the shower door, and to be honest with you, I wasn't sure that it was going to hold up, but it is superb.
Yeah.
It feels light. It is light.
Yeah.
And it does feel maybe a little bit sort of flimsy, and I can understand people thinking, oh, I'm not sure about that, but it has been excellent.
Yeah, and there's no water leakage from it or anything. It's absolutely dry. It's really good.
Yeah. Same with the table. You know, I wasn't sure about the table, the size of the table. It's actually quite heavy, and I thought, oh, is that going to be okay? But again, you know, we've got a good table base, and it really has sort of stood the test. So yeah, so far so good. Something we've definitely got right, and if you've watched the build series, you know that I always used to go on about ventilation. The venting of those dead air spaces was absolutely key, and I went to great lengths to router holes and drill holes, and you know, make sure there was cross-flow ventilation so that we didn't have a build-up of condensation. In the extremes of temperature, you got air conditioning going, you got hot, cold, blizzards, all sorts of things happening, and we haven't had a single drip. I mean, I'm in, you know, the cupboards and having a look, looking at every aspect.
Condensation. We don't even get any condensation on the windows, really.
No.
The only place we haven't vented that we should have done is this cupboard here, which is where the Starlink router lives, and it does get really hot, and I don't know if it was any hotter outside, if that router would maybe shut down. So I think we're going to have to put a vent in there somewhere to the outside.
I mean, it hasn't shut down, but we feel that, you know, if it was sort of in the 40s, yes, we have the air conditioning.
I mean, you're opening the cupboard and it's almost too, well, it is too hot to touch.
Yeah.
Which can't be right.
Starlink, one of the best things we did,
brilliant,
to be honest with you. And the sort of forethought, you know, having the mounted housing, if you like, the bracket on the roof, routing the cable in advance was great, because it means that I can just literally put the dish on and off as and when required. So really, really happy with that, and it's performing really well. The splashback, the blue splashback that we got terribly wrong.
I got terribly wrong, I think.
I was trying to get a bit of ownership there. Yeah, we got that wrong, and I still feel...
We can't learn to live with it, I don't think. I think we'll change it.
You get used to it, but it's
I think we will change it.
Anyway, again, 21st century problems. Outside, all the tool bins, the outdoor cooking space. Yes, we changed the grill, but the actual space itself with the drawer works brilliantly. The bike rack needs a couple of additional pulleys. It's got a 2,000 kilogram winch on there, which is fine, but it surprisingly, you can hear it sort of straining, and it's okay, and it's working fine, but I think another couple of pulleys on there would work wonders. On top of that, so the spare wheel, so I have had the spare wheel off, and that actually worked fine. Again, if you watch the videos, you'll know what I'm talking about. That was a real process to try and figure out, puzzle out exactly how I was going to carry both of those. We travel at 13.1 tons, fully laden. That includes the bike, all our liquids, and 2 people. So we've got a huge amount of capacity, and actually the weight distribution is almost exactly 50-50 front to back. So really, really happy with that. One of the things that I would change, or we are going to change, is the runners on the platform. Now, we bought 250 kilogram runners. They're okay, but we've subsequently used another company for the step into the bedroom, which are excellent. It's a French brand, Chamberlain? Chamberlain, I knew it was something like that. And they are superb. And I think we're going to change them for these. They're much heavier duty, really good quality. I've come across a guy with a truck who's used them on his, and yeah, it was just...
I mean, the platform works, but it's a bit sticky, it's a bit glitchy.
Get a bit of sand in there.
Yeah, it's just not as smooth as we want it to be. I can't open it. Phil's deliberately made it so that my arms don't stretch far enough to put down the little knobs, and even if I could, I think it would just be, it's too sticky. Yeah.
Okay, so there you go. I made it too big. Now, one of the big things that I really want to talk about is the subframe. Now, we've gone with a rail-on-rail subframe, and our intent was always to go down that route. Right from the off, even before we had the base vehicle, we knew that we were going to go down the rail-on-rail subframe route. Now, it's very subjective. We've had a 4-point independent subframe, and one of the downsides to whether it's a 3-point or a 4-point subframe, is that you do get a pendulum effect. And anyone that says that you don't, come on, not get real, but be honest. There is a pendulum effect with those. Now, yes, it's torsion free. Yes, it's going to give you the most amount of articulation, but for probably 85% of the time you're on roads or decent tracks. I think people get caught up on, I need, a 4-point because I need the most articulation that I can possibly get. Well, you've got to go a long way to really sort of push it to that extreme, and you really don't need that. And I was so surprised to go to the German Overland show, the Abenture and Allrad, and to see professional builders, big German companies, building on a rail-on-rail. And when you speak to them, when I spoke to a lot of people on our travels who have said, yeah, I'm on my second build, I'm on my third or fourth build, and they said, yeah, I used to have a 4-point, but I've gone down the rail on rail because of the stability, because of the road handling, because it gives me enough articulation for my needs, and that's exactly where we're at. And it can be a little bit disconcerting when you're traversing and you're hitting bumps and you're already at a limit, and it feels quite unstable. And it's the best decision that we made, because we easily have enough articulation with our setup here.
Yeah.
And I'm really happy with the road manners, but the off-road level of articulation on this truck is superb. So
it's definitely helped me. I used to hate that pendulum effect, and it put me off going off-road because I did feel unstable, and because we were always travelling at the top of our weight limit as well, you know, stressing the base vehicle. And I think on this trip it's really helped me feel safe in the cab. The truck feels, it still moves, but it feels solid. And it feels like it's not going to pendulum. I used to worry we would tip over, and I just don't have that fear in this truck.
I think as well, you know, we have a big wheelbase and it's a slightly wider, and that probably helps with the feeling of stability. And again, it's a bit of a heavier base vehicle. So that probably helps as well. And it also helps with the overall height.
Yes.
So it's all these little bits that actually help to create a feel of stability and a feeling of capability. And you know, when I was driving this vehicle in the desert, you know, over the dunes and on those really sort of rocky sections, I'm watching the whole time and thinking, I was really getting quite excited and thinking, this is brilliant. This is exactly what I was hoping for. And you don't really know when you build something from scratch, and you're trying to work out spring rates, and you're trying to work out exactly because every vehicle is different, and this is probably the longest you can get away with in terms of rail on rail for that 4.5 meter wheelbase. And overall, I'm just delighted with the performance of it.
So in terms of the testing of the truck, I think we're actually really pleased. It went really well, better than could have been expected, and there were no disasters. And I think that was always our worry, was that if we were in a country like Morocco and something went badly wrong, how would we get it sorted? We had our fair share of issues, the things with the wheel nuts, the little oil leak that we needed to have repaired, and so on. But actually, overall, I would say that the test was really successful.
Yeah, I'm really pleased.
Yeah, you should be.
Yeah, so, but I've got a list of things here that
of course,
I'm pulling the page ever closer, because there's quite a few things that we do want to change and do want to upgrade.
Yeah.
So number one is the seats, and we've always said that.
My seat is so uncomfortable.
They're crap, so they need changing.
Yeah.
The routing of the air conditioning, and I'll show that in another video, but
yeah,
basically that needs to be changed ever so slightly to make it more efficient. The bike rack, so I mentioned a couple of additional pulley points on there to make it more efficient, but if you were doing one, you could consider a hydraulic route as well. The tow points and winch, I've sort of combined that into one, so I do want to put a winch on the front. They're expensive, and you're talking sort of between 5 and 7 grand really for a good winch that's going to pull this out of a hole.
that might be a while then.
And when that winch is placed centrally on the sort of front bumper, then I do want to get a couple of tow points put in either side of that as well. So anyway, the rear cab springs. Now
we squeak like crazy.
if you listen carefully to some of the videos, you hear like a little squeak.
Yeah.
And it's it's the original springs in the cab. They need replacing. Yeah, they're a little bit rusty, and yeah, they're not brilliant. Thankfully, they're not too expensive. I've yet to do the so they fit a heat exchanger, and to be able to tee off from the vehicle's cooling system to feed through the heat exchanger and into the calorifier just to give us hot water when we're driving. So that is still on the list.
Yeah.
Soundproofing of the cab.
Yes, please.
That again, all of that could be.
You get used to it, but when you haven't been in the cab for a while and then you get going again, you remember how noisy it is.
Yeah. A 12-volt light in the toilet cubicle. Now we do have a light around the mirror, but we do have all the wiring there for it.
Yeah.
It was
It's
actually
not right though, is it?
It was actually Izzy that said, "Oh, I don't think we need one," but living with it 6 months in, we think we need one.
Yeah.
Again, small fry stuff. The water tank overflow. This is something that does need to be sorted out. So there's a breather, but there's also an overflow. Now the overflow needs to be modified slightly because when it's full and we go around a corner, I do lose some water, and I just need to correct that so I don't lose the water effectively. The possibility of fitting some aluminium roof bars so down alongside the box, really to give the solar panels a bit of protection. Again, another nice to
I
have.
see the bills racking up here.
It is. None of this, I mean, we could travel for the foreseeable future without any of this.
Of course we could, yeah.
Yeah.
It's just you want it to be perfect.
Yeah. So you mentioned the vent
Yeah.
in the cabin tray, and it's really funny because these things are never finished. They're just, you'll never meet somebody who goes,
No.
yeah, it's done, that's it. And if you're that way inclined, you're striving for perfection, and hopefully I will eventually get this thing completely finished.
Yeah, hopefully.
Another point I want to make is the paint colour. We love the paint colour. Thankfully, we still love the paint colour. And when you're looking at swatches, and even though I had someone painted on the the door, and you're looking at it in different lights, it looks differently. We're actually really pleased with it. So it's a bit different. It's a bit subtle, and I think we got that one right.
Yeah.
But overall, no showstoppers. So the message is, if you're thinking about building an overland truck, do your homework. Really think about that design side of things, and that was the bit that I think we got right. We started 9 months in, having lived in a truck at the same time, so we had a really good starting point.
Yeah.
And then the design side of it is absolutely key to building the overland truck.
Totally.
So I think that's pretty much it, guys. If you've got any queries, send us a message. I've been rubbish at responding to all the messages.
Oh, we've been so busy.
But if you've got a particular question, then we do try and get back to you, and or send us a direct message. But otherwise,
this sort of wraps up really at the minute, doesn't it? Our truck videos.
it does.
Because we're moving on to something else.
We are.
We're not stopping travelling, obviously, because we've just built an overland truck, but we won't be travelling full time going forward.
No. We will do some big trips, but we
Yeah.
are going to take, it's almost 7 years since we started travelling and building the truck. And to be honest with you, we're knackered. Travelling full time is exhausting work.
Yeah.
And we are going to move on to something slightly different.
Well, we're going to be spending the summer at our off-grid house in Spain that we bought some years ago, but we haven't lived in it for a long time because we've been travelling, and also my sister's been living here. But we've now got it back, we've reclaimed it, and boy is there a lot of work to do. So we're going to be focusing on that for the next few months, so keep tuned because I think you'll enjoy it. If you've enjoyed what we've done with the truck, you'll certainly enjoy what we're doing with the house.
Yeah, in between that there'll be a little bit of bike stuff as well, so we're just going to mix it up a little bit, but there will be some bigger trips further on down the line in the truck, so stick with us. But until then, thanks for all your support on the channel,
and thank you.
And we'll see you next time round. Bye for now.
Bye.